du... Oh.
If you don't know, in Nuxt.js, when you are creating an app, you can specify the method by typing app.get, app.post, app.patch, and then you provide an action. Here, what it does actually, without putting a suffix, it does an app.all. It means that it's going to receive any request depending on the method. So the best way is always to specify. Of course, if you get a post, instead of get, you're going to put a post. If you get a delete, you're going to put a delete, etc., etc. Previously on the server part, we talked about Nitro. Because when we launch our application on Nuxt 3, if we look at the terminal, we can read that Nuxt is running on Nitro. What is Nitro? Well, actually, Nitro, it's a server engine. And actually, on the official documentation, we've got some information about Nitro. Nuxt 3 is powered by a new server engine, Nitro. It is cross-platform support for Node.js, browser, service worker, and more. Because before, Nuxt was running on Node.js, now it took Nitro, this new engine, that helped us to make Nuxt 3 running. Serverless support out of the box, API root support that we saw already on the server part, automatic code splitting, async loaded chunks, hybrid mode for static plus serverless site, and we will see that this hybrid mode is the brand new feature of Nuxt 3, development server with auth module reloading. There's also a website for Nitro on nitro.njs.io, and if we click on Get Started, suddenly we see that on the documentation, we recognize what we've got on our server part on Nuxt 3. We see that we have this method called define event handler. And we see that we can create actually a backend, a server with Nitro. So why Nuxt 3 decided to use Nitro? For many reasons, and one of these reasons is that we can use the cache API to cache elements. Okay, so the thing is that Nuxt.js is really known for its SEO performance and its server-side rendering mode. We are going to see later the modes. However, now let's talk a little bit at how we can cache element with Nuxt 3. Basically, what's going to happen when we use SSR is that every time we are requesting a server, the server is going to build the application and deliver it to the client. The difference with the SPA mode is that on the SPA mode, everything is done on the client side. With the SSR mode and the hybrid mode that we are going to see later, we can cache elements, which means that instead of every time there is a request, our Nuxt application has to be built, we cache the element every 5 minutes, for instance, and every 5 minutes somebody is going to come, it's going to build a cache version, and during these 5 minutes, it's going to deliver the content to the next call. Also, Nitro provides to us a built-in storage layer that can abstract our file system or database to any data source. And that can be very useful, especially if you are doing some Redis. We can store actually some elements when we need them. Then, of course, it is backend, so we can use the router handling from Nitro that help us to create some routes and some endpoints to provide some operation. And which is really funny, and at this point of the course, you already saw a lot of auto imports with Nuxt.js. We have also auto import with Nitro. What I like especially about Nitro also is that there is a deployment documentation that helps you to deploy, for instance on Netlify, that helps you to deploy Nitro if you want to use it also at Nitro to have a quick present to Nitro is on Nitro free. Of this whole course about Nuxt, and this is probably the one you were waiting for, because Nuxt.js is really known for its options about rendering. So previously in the lessons, I was talking about how you can render differently your applications, and it's not related to Nuxt.js. However, Nuxt.js is providing many options that are very useful when you want to take care about the SEO of your application, for instance. So for this lesson, we are going to look at two documentation. The old one, the one about Nuxt 2, and then we are going to switch to the Nuxt 3 to see the difference. What is rendering? Well, we can look at a good definition about rendering on the new documentation, and we can see that here it's written both the browser and server can interpret JavaScript code to render Vue.js component into HTML elements. So we can see that we can render our application from Vue.js component into HTML element on the client side and on the server side. This step is called rendering. Nuxt supports both client-side and universal rendering. The two approaches have pros and cons that we will cover in this section. But before, let's get back to the old documentation and let's look at how it was written before. We talk directly about server-side rendered seats or server-side rendering, SSR, and static side. Server-side rendered sites are rendered on the server each time the user requests a page. Therefore, a server is needed to be able to serve the page on each request. Static site, which is the opposite of SSR, are very similar to server-side rendered application, with the main difference being that static site are rendered at build time. Therefore, no server is needed. The static sites, they are not built every time there's a request. They are built at build time. When you type npm run build, for you fetch the data and browser. So that you want to have all the data or the frame will use SSR. And with Nuxt 2, we had the option SSR true, which we could put on nuxt.config.js or ts. So when I go on nuxt.config.t type, it will be built immediately on you. Change a lot of things. Explanation. Client-side only rendering. Out of the box, a traditional Vue.js application is rendered in the browser, in the client. So the computer actually, not the server or the phone. Then Vue.js generates HTML elements after the browser downloads and parses all the JavaScript code. And this schema is explaining it very well. The browser downloads an empty HTML document. Then the browser download and run the JavaScript. And the app is rendered and interactive. This is the client-side rendering. We see that the JavaScript is not executed. We got pros and cons about this technique. The development speed is a pro. When working entirely on the client side, we don't have to worry about the server compatibility of the code. For example, the using browser-only API like the window object. Because yes, on the server-side rendering, you don't get any window object. So that's a problem. But however, it's a development speed feature that is a pro of the client-side rendering. It's cheaper. Running a server at the cost of infrastructure, and we've got also other problems related to this. And offline, because code entirely runs in the browser, it can nicely keep working while the internet is unavailable, which means that with the client side only, when you fetch the application, you don't need anymore to have actually internet running. Instead, if you are fetching some data, but it can work offline, which is amazing. The cons of the client-side rendering is the performance. The user has to wait for the browser to download, parse, and run the JavaScript file. The server-side rendering is faster, and the client-side needs actually a good internet connection, and it needs also memory to make the work, to render the application in the browser. This is because you would like to have good SSID to try to index on your project. You should rendering. What happened? I say to you, definition of rendering is working this way. The fully HTML is sent to the browser and rendered. So the work here has been done about all the data completed on the server side. Then the browser download and run the JavaScript in background. Then a new step is coming in the browser. So when you use SS, it's maybe because you didn't make the static page interactive in the browser. It didn't take time to complete. Of course, it's the opposite of the client side. Universal application step, we have the iteration, and then we got also the page content already rendered, which makes universal rendering a great choice for any content that you want to index quickly. Then of course, and never to writing client that you also is on the because work in SSR different cache request on a given URL. So now basically with this hybrid thing, what we can do is that we can specify on each page what strategy we want to choose. Explained before, what we can do is between the tool with application, we need to refer to rules. You can define cat.config.ts tool specify each, and I can specify if I want to use server-side rendering or not, if I want to use some header, for instance, or if I want to have just static. And I can also work on headers with redirect and status code and etc. etc. Option. And that before we had just. When we go on the official documentation, we can see that Nuxt provide use fetch, use lazy fetch, use async data, and use lazy async data. So we are going to start by use fetch, and what we're going to do at first is to go on our project, and on Nuxt.config.ts, I'm going to put my SSR mode on false, so like an SPA or a static website. Is not declared as a server-side, but and we are going to start with use fetch side or on the client side. This composable provides a convenient wrapper around use async data and fetch. And what have this available on? We can see that it's a that is a library and we generate request down there first. In maybe we can be refresh the call and the data actually display the, but we are going to come from an API and add here a products.call some local put here API definitely which is as do proxy. I'm not going to do to the data. This is if I want to put it into and what put as an option here say that I want to is to open an object. Just put keys that many keys watch transform turn is which give me the array and what about this date. If I go to my nuxt.config.ts server number use fetch can be you doing so, and you won't see loading. If I get back loading actually that is available at this display and as another function which is called use lazy fetch, because use fetch is freezing your application until the moment it receives the data and then it renders the data. With use lazy fetch, we want to display a loader, so display the application immediately and display is asynchronous all the way. I'm just going to will happen is okay. Hey, the products is wait for app happening, and most of the time we app and it's working very well. Async data within our page. Components and plugins can use async data to get access to data that resolve asynchronously. And we have a definition about the difference between use fetch and use async data. Use fetch receives the URL and gets that data, whereas use async data might have more complex logic. Use fetch URL is equivalent to use async URL fetch URL. It's developer experience sugar for most common use case. And down there we've got an example of actually this use async data, which actually is fetching an endpoint with a counter their example and this use async with this time a key and not a URL and a function which calls using the callback that you will create. Wait there action count wait we will need to and callback we will have a ending there. So I'm going to get back, I'm going to update, and what we see is that There we go, we've got our product count, but there was no pending. Now I know that my server is running and that there is this actually every time I fetch this incremental function, what I can do is here using a trigger use another function provided going to use. So I get back, I click, we see that I got finally my. So now I'm going to use actually use as use lazy fetch. Sorry. Now and use async data. It's been add because it's second data composite and on use fetch on the add in composite. Also next data with asset will be function method read the headers on use fetch. If you have a front-end application, you might want to work on the SEO. The search engine optimization is going to help you to be found on Google. And of course, with Nuxt Free, we got everything we need to index every page with the right SEO metas that we can put inside a built-in composable that is available. Several options. Winding allows you to use the page from here and course on again. Next course, I open my head, we can see that I'm gonna have for tick today. We can see it's that on my head. That actually what I'm trying to put is a meta. So this description is supposed to be a meta, and what I can do is a meta. Open object, a lot of stuff. So the meta that I want to put here, this is where my description should be. So there we go. Update, add my description. That's actually script. The SEO app, whole application. Don't get going to get back to the documentation there. So we already saw that add again, and we saw use in exactly the same. And if we look at this object as in Nuxt.conf as setup s, okay, as a lang. So I'm going to add to copy paste to put this is my home page for Nuxt course. To or links or whatever. I'm going to go to that I have added. So this course is not really about SEO, but it's just a good way here that I'm showing you to add some SEO on a specific page. We would catch this ID with the use root param of the page, actually script setup, add there and in my page file, of course. And inside this example with the use head, now we've got a console log hello world. So when I come back to this index page, we see that I got my hello world that has been triggered here. This is a good way when you want to call a CDN on a specific page instead of putting the CDN link here in nuxt.config.ts. There is another way to deal with SEO. It's by components. Nuxt provides title, base, no script, style, meta, links, body, all those built-in components that we can interact directly with your metadata within your component template. So let's have a look there. We see that we got just a title, remove all of this, title built-in like to. There we go, we see that I have this is my title. And if we continue, we can see that I can add some description and some style also. So in my case, it's useless because I already got Tailwind, but I could have a dynamic title. So I'm going to add my dynamic title. And here, this is my dynamic title. Of course, if it would be a dynamic title, it would be dynamic here. We could have some example together that we got with the specific by page. We could put the layout we would like, and we use define in my Nuxt application. And here we see that we can also define the SEO through the define page meta. So what is the difference between SEO specific? The powerful hooking system to expand almost every aspect using hooks. This feature is powered by Nuxt.js hookable. These hooks are available for Nuxt module and build context. And here we got the example with close. However, if you want to have the list of all the hooks, you can go there in the API documentation at advanced, and then you can click here on lifecycle hooks. And suddenly we've got the list of every hook that we can use with a description. And it's also telling us the environment we can use, because sometimes it can be server, sometimes it can be client, etc., etc. The other way is to go here inside. We can look at the interface and you can, we see that we've got to pick up this top and restart it there certain moments, and you would like to see all those hooks that are available there. And be safe, because some hooks, they are triggered in some environment. Some can be server and client, so those life cycles inside a plugin. So here we've got an example of a plugin that would be triggered every time there is a page start. So I'm going to copy paste this. I got a plugin.ts that comes back from a previous course, and here to my context, I would add a new hook on app created, and I would like to console log from plugin. And what we see that I already got hello from plugin, and here I got hello from plugin too. I could add some hooks from some plugins when I would like to trigger some operation at certain step of the initialization of my. Another subject that we are not going to treat here, because it's related to Nuxt but not directly, is the usage of Nuxt.kit. Nuxt.kit is the library that helps you to create modules. And if you would like to create a module, also, you could loop through the Nuxt context and add your own hook inside the module that you would like to create. Nuxt gives us access to a config file. We can add some CSS paths, or we can add some specific at the nuxt.config. And we added, for instance, I can give the mode of having this tailwind.com added here because of the module from config. All actually sounds we can add to define Nuxt config, which is object, and in this big object have a lot of options. And which is interesting is that we can access this config also, this runtime config. We can access it inside our DOM by just using this inside this our view. Then later we've got a lot of configuration, and again this app config is available. And yeah, if we want to look deeper at it, you can go on get started configurations that are available. Pass on, just go. We all write by yourselves that says that actually you can access through the for very use. You have the base dir, it's related yen euro only, yen euro DSO in the course, which can be actually here every to keep it inside your app. You got the layout from you can. If I want to change for dir option, we'll have so, and you got the logs on the console, the insecture also. So change pub yes text it will instance files with this extra add your modules. Where is your app? Figure that solve is here. Give you any static to interest is, and maybe can do that coding and you will write with Nuxt content. And here it's init content app, so I'm going to copy paste this, get back, and I'm going to enter in my folder. There we go. And here it's to enter in my folder. There we go. Enter. And here it's going to create for me a content application. It's a Nuxt application. So everything that you've learned inside this course will be available inside this app. So I'm going to enter into it. Once I'm into my project, what I can see again is that it's a very, very light project. There's only an app.view with a Nuxt page at the root. I got a page component with a slug. And I got this content doc. Content doc is just the routing system of Nuxt content, a built-in component provided by Nuxt content that display all the pages that will be in content. And if I look in my package.json, what I can see is that
Чё? Вообще не то. Get started.
as dev dependencies, I got Nuxt, I got Nuxt content, and I got this folder called content, and inside I have markdown files. I have about, I got index, and just let's
Бам.
run our project, and that's it. We have our website running, Nuxt content, and it says this page corresponds to the /root of your website, blah, blah, blah. And these two pages are rendered by the pages slug.view. So here we see that we've got a slug and we've got our index. So I'm going to try to go on /about to see, and there we go. I got this about page. And actually this about page is coming from here. So here I can write in Markdown. So to write in Markdown, the syntax is really simple. You can find a lot of websites that will teaches you how to write in Markdown. But here, and as you see, instead of working on your SEO, it can be very useful to create a website this way, because the content here will be rendered immediately because it's just static content and there will be no JavaScript that will run inside your website. So use DAX, for instance, title syntax of Markdown. There we go. As you see, you could be way faster by writing here in MD file instead of working in an HTML file. Let's create a new page. Let's say that we're gonna have some kind of new file called profile.md, and here I would like, this is my profile. Hello, my name is Guillaume. Okay, I'm going to save this, and now I'm going to go to a slash in profile, and I type enter, and immediately my root has been created. So of course, this Markdown is really limited. You cannot do any JavaScript or very complicated stuff into it. It's not made to create web application, really. It's more to create some content. So another thing is that right now, my website is totally empty. I would like to add back to the Nuxt.com document as a module. Instead, is to install this Tailwind module. So I'm going to stop. I'm going to install Tailwind as a module. Then I will need to add it to my modules there. So I'm going to go to my Nuxt config, and actually Nuxt content is working exactly like any other module. As you see, here we've got Nuxt content that has been added, and we've got Tailwind CSS. So you can either create a Nuxt content application through this Nuxt content npx init, or you can still add Nuxt content to your existing project. Okay, so I'm going to type yarn dev. There we go. And if I get back to my app, I should have Tailwind CSS that is applied. And there we go. So now I got Tailwind CSS. What I can do is actually to inspect, etc. I click there, create a new folder. I'm going to create an assets. And in this, I'm going to create a main.scss. So what I will do is to stop my server and to type npm install sass. And what I would do actually is just to type, I'm going to type CSS inside my nuxt.config.ts. So I'm going to type @assets main.scss, and I would save that. Here, what I would do is to import from Tailwind my base, and I would target my layer base, which is actually the basic layer that I'm using with Tailwind on my application. And what I would do, I would say, hey, I want that my H1 would be apply text red 500. That's a color from Tailwind. So when I get back, we see suddenly that I got 100. That's a color from Tailwind. So when I get back, we see suddenly that I got my title there, and exactly it would do the same on every page. Okay, so what I could do also is just to put all this content so I can get back to my slug, and here on the main I could say that I want to put a container mx auto there. So I would say that I want to put a container mx auto there. So I would say, there we go. And what I could do also, I could add some margin on the top and on the bottom with my4. And there we go. So as you see, now I can create my own style sheet, my own design system, and then apply it to my content everywhere in my application. Again, for the routing, what I can do is just to use the markdown. So here on about, we see that I got a link. Let's go on index and let's just remove this. Let's say home. And let's say that I want to have a link that would say go to profile in with time / profile. There we go. And I want to style my link. So I'm going to go here and say that all links will have, for instance, a color. So text till, yes, let's say till 600 and underline, whatever. I'm going to save that. And there we go. And when I click, I can go to the page I want with the routing system. If you want to know more about Nuxt content, you can go on the documentation. You can hit JSON. As you see here, you it's about querying. You want to add, you can do is add a page. So this is my Nuxt content main page, whatever. And when you get back here, we see on the top that I got this is my Nuxt content main page. So if you want to work on some metas, you can add them here on the top. And which is cool also with Nuxt content, it's that it's really easy to deploy. It's really fast because it's just static content that will be built and rendered. Website, and we can, of course, if we want, create some documentation. For this practical exercise that I propose you to end my course on, okay, I can create my with there is teams and as using the dev. It's actually a team for Nuxt people, but the thing is, will application the version NVML 16. So me, I'm going to look by typing npm NVMLS, sorry, and I'm going to use the 16.17.1 because the 18 there might be some bugs. So here, we're going to say nvm use 16.17.1. There we go. And now what I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy paste this to create my project. And there we go. We're going to do, I'm just going to copy paste this to create my project. And then now NVM I'm going to do, I'm just going to copy paste this to create my. And if we take a look at it a little bit, we can see that it's a bit different. We've got some TS file, renovate.json. There's a bit of different configuration here, but actually it's still using Nuxt 3 with, we can see on the dev dependencies, the Nuxt team docus. So here we've got our content. What we're going to do, we are going to launch it right away. So I'm going to type yarn and yarn dev. I got an empty documentation that is available.
Нихуя себе.
With some specification, I can turn it to light and dark, and I got this get started, and it's totally empty, and we can start writing a fake document. Specify for my sidebar, on which side are going to be the documentation. Okay, so what we could do at first is just to start with a fake API. So here I'm going to call it actually fake countries API. Okay, API, there we go, documentation. Smart button where we can put the get started, the button, secondary button. Then also on our snippet we can put actually some code if we would. API name, more info there. So it's a new API there. It will create my NA back and then go. Okay, my would use my country, please. Made it install for me and list from the library. We've got to be a get. I'm going to change. Okay, I'm going and in list. There we go. Again, do now this endpoint. So I got API/random. So what I can do is getting back on my fake countries API. I'm going to click on get started. And what I'm going to do at first is not to remove this get started because I want to keep it. But actually I'm going to create a, in the guide, actually in the guide section, I'm going to, oh, maybe what can I do is to create a second folder called endpoints. All right. And if we save, nothing is happening here because what I need to do is to create a dir.yaml at the root, and I'm going to use this as an example. So I'm going to copy paste this title guide, and I need to put a title. So I'm going to save here. Nothing happens because I empty. I'm going to save, and there we go. As you see, I got there is and country. I'm going to get and mark what we made, and I'm going to save. And as we see, a random country. Go on the official actually API folder. I'm going to create a new folder called countries.py. Okay. So the same function user actually this side country notes is just a variable function a body as an object, which is very cool. So I can do to return so that it's not fine will be no list and to get to do this subject it's going on two ones. Rapid API, your action. I'm going to locate country, and when I type on, now we're down to finding back action polynase or API. What in by find is going. I update it. I'm not there because it's not quick to talk. I have to could do there. Okay, so in Mark that should be going to a/a as an example. So I'm going to fake and hit type kind of that's of documentation. However, if we look closely at what we do, but of course, okay, we and that we've got to the script later we'll as a document would like to end document, so we should change countries on the guide countries in the docus check the use UI about section, and we see here on the right that is really worked. We actually after this is test at this on really the way of I'm going to show all the then pick at my // it rates post cards the same try is to fed when I'm going see meeting well you are good in use not you and the Nuxt team. Here on Nuxt team, what you can see is that you have several different teams that you could apply. Here, I figured out an example create my full stack. It helps.
Друзья, всем привет! В этом видео я хочу вам показать, как сделать приложение на Vue 3, а именно на компьютере. Он меня спрашивает, как назвать проект. Vue Project. Нажму Enter. Добавить TypeScript, да. JSX не нужен, роутер не нужен, пиня не нужна, vtest не нужен. Это для тестирования не нужно, есть assets и вставляю. Теперь перехожу в файл main.ts. Два и более раза. Это может быть либо ошибочный символ, либо правильный символ. Props. Я должен использовать следующий подход. Я должен в слове Word. Я уже вижу, как проверяем, как это работает. Но теоретически должно работать. Вот как здесь, видите, да? Type game notification. Поэтому я пишу или null. Вот так вот. Вот теперь set timeout. Передаем сюда функцию notification. Получать весь массив. Зачем? Мы просто получим длину этого массива. Так, давайте создадим интерфейс для пропсов. Интерфейс props. Как назовем? Играли. Так, давайте это сделаем. Состояние. Давайте сделаем это. Назову переменную статус. И здесь тоже переменим статус. То я смотрим, допускаю ошибки. Сыграть еще раз. Начинаю игру снова. Все работает. Но все да не все. Если я сейчас введу имя Василий, у нас не появился попап, который говорит, что мы победили. Почему? Давайте посмотрим. Перехожу в компонент app и вижу. Correct letters 6. Слово Василий у нас состоит из 7 букв. Потому что мы дубли не вставляем. Не добавляем в массив letters. Здесь только уникальные символы. Ну, соответственно, как correct letters. Соответственно, поэтому мы и не видим этого окна. Могу продолжить вводить символы. Видите? Я нажимаю Shift, G, C, и они появляются, заносятся в ошибки. Что делать? Мы должны заблокировать.
Сервер-сайт рендеринга от клиент-сайт рендеринга. Поэтому я нарисовал такую диаграмму content у 1. Требуется большое количество времени. Опять же, это относительно. После этого браузер получает этот JavaScript bundle, начинает его парсить. И на это тоже требуется определенное количество времени. То есть, чем мощнее у вас машинка, на которой вы сидите, то есть не просто изначально мы так вначале не HTML общался, но привет. статические HTML-файлы в случае, если мы работаем в моде Single Page Application. Что касается зависимости, то здесь тоже все довольно просто. Есть какие-то системные зависимости для запуска разных environment и лежит. Далее у нас есть шаблон. Поэтому мы с этим можем дальше работать. Теперь я предлагаю задать структуру для приложения. И, допустим, у нас будет навигационное меню и будут несколько страниц. Давайте посмотрим в Bootstrap, как это делается. Подсвечивается всегда ссылка Home активно. Для того, чтобы в нашем приложении был road users, в папке мне необходимо создать файл с названием и параметры в этот метод лучше. Да, и получаем. Тут вы можете посмотреть. Очень удобно. Я попадаю на поддомен официального сайта Nuxt, где есть описание этого модуля. Здесь давайте перейдем в поле Setup и установим данный пакет. Здесь в ответ мы получаем просто какой-то статический JSON. Обновим страницу. Промис. И здесь мы можем сделать то же самое, что мы и делали в прошлом подходе. Единственное, что я говорил, мы не имеем доступа до ключевого слова this в тех методах, которые мы будем делать на сервере. Поэтому здесь мы получаем определенный контекст, и из контекста мы можем достать, например, модуль Axios, с помощью которого мы сделаем запрос.